Welcome to By All Means Necessary Real Recovery Talk. I'm Marco. I'm a grateful recovering addict. This is episode 9. We have a good friend of mine, Tyler, in the building. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you.
It's good to see you, man.
You too.
Tyler's actually coming up on 12 years sober. And just a quick backstory. We've known each other for almost coming up on 7 years. I actually, when I got out of rehab, I met Tyler. He had an IOP. That's an intensive outpatient program that he ran and he was the owner of. And the first day that I met Tyler, again, you know, I was coming out of 30-day rehab. I used for 19 years, so I basically hated myself and I hated the world. And I met Tyler, and I basically told him to go fuck himself. He wanted me to, you know, fill out all these papers, and I just really didn't believe in what an intensive outpatient program. I didn't know what it was. I didn't think it would work. I thought I just, you know, finished rehab and I was cured. And I remember that I walked out, and you actually came out and you stopped me, and we talked for about 30 to 45 minutes. And it was really cool, bro, because in that program, well, maybe it wasn't great for you because I think there was probably like 8 to 10 of us, right?
Yeah.
But you and I had many, many conversations there, a lot. And I really appreciate everything that you actually, you know, showed me and taught me. And we had some really deep conversations about recovery. And I'm really grateful, man. I wanted, you know, this whole process of this podcast is really to just, you know, show people that there is hope and there is and bring people awareness. And, you know, if you meet people and surround yourself with the right people, that you can actually live a good life in recovery. And so welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you.
I haven't heard your story, so where were you born? Where are you from?
Well, I was actually born in Edmond, Oklahoma, but I don't really say I'm from there. You know, when I was when I was a baby, I think I was like 8 weeks old. My mother took me to New Jersey. Actually, you know, when I do tell my whole life story, I usually, you know, start right there for a good reason, and that's because, you know, my biological father and mother had a sudden split. You know, if you know what I mean, and so my mom took off, just really tried to get out of Dodge, and went back to New Jersey where she grew up and stayed with her mom.
Okay.
So my very early years were at my grandmother's house, which was actually, you know, pretty great setup, I think. I thought it was a lot of fun, you know, it was a lot of freedom. And, you know, so that was kind of like my early life experience. And my mom remarried when I was like, I think I was like 3 years old. And so who I grew up with was my stepdad, but I called him Dad.
Okay.
So, you know, when I have conversations, I'll say stepdad because people don't, you know, they don't know the dynamic, but really I've never called him stepdad my entire life.
You relate to him as your dad?
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
So,
I was in the same boat when I was like 11 or 12. Yeah, so I totally understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and as part of my story, actually, he ended up legally adopting me later when I turned 18. But so, you know, it's funny because whenever I talk about my family life and everything, you know, I used to tell people when I first got clean and sober that I would just default to like, I had a great childhood. You know, I was one of those kids that just had no problems and it was really easy peasy. And I was just like of the nature of having, you know, the disease of addiction, and then it wasn't really like, it wasn't caused by my environment, right?
So this is like in the beginning when you're telling people.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And also when I was in treatment and therapy, people were like, Tyler, you know, talk about your past and your stuff. And I'm like, I had a great, you know, everything was great. And, you know, when you're around enough, because a lot of recovery, right, for me anyway, recovery is, the practice of recovery is communication, right? Just like this podcast, I mean, it's communication, right? So as I communicated with others in recovery And as I listened to others, I started to pick up on things in my own childhood that like wasn't normal that I could relate to in their stories.
All right.
And so, you know, I was pretty sheltered. I spent a lot of time by myself. I was super recluse. I had obsessions with things. Really, first, it was like Legos. I just would sit in my basement and play with Legos. So, you know, you think about the age brackets of Legos, that's like probably like 5 to like 10, just destroyed half a decade in my basement, you know, literally designing things and thinking I was going to send them to the Lego company and they were going to put them in boxes and sell them. So that was like my life goal. And I tried, I sent in designs, just crazy obsessed with the idea. And eventually that kind of like got switched into something else, and it became bicycles, BMX, bike riding, freestyle.
Right.
So I got totally obsessed with that. One of the reasons, like, and I guess that I've always said about my story, right? Oh, I was into this and I was into that. But the reality is it was like my way of disconnecting from reality. It was my way of disconnecting from what was going on around me. And it's funny because I'll have those conversations with people. You know, I still work in recovery. I'll have those 30, 40-minute conversations like we had, and I'll talk about something like that, about how I didn't realize I was using it to disconnect.
Right.
And they're like, they kind of give me that little head nod, like they start considering things that behaviors of their own
Yeah, exactly.
as not, you know, typical or normal or healthy, whatever you want to call them, right?
And they're relating to you.
Yeah. And so it's kind of nice that I have a little bit of that awareness now, and definitely came out more, you know, as I grew up, and I was really 13 years old was really when I kind of started to get into alcohol and drugs.
At 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely, you know, when I was 12, I had my first drunk, which was probably also my first drink and also my first blackout all at once. That was, and that, you know, I like to talk about that particular story, not as a war story, but to talk about how it relates later to my life, because I had ended up drinking at a family function. So we had our family reunion that we do every year, and I would watch all the adults, and they had a keg, and that's what they would do. They would drink and celebrate and hang out, and it was at the Jersey Shore, and I snuck some pitchers of beer, and we went behind the big hotel that everybody stayed in, and me and my cousins, we drank, and I got so drunk, I guess I passed out on the beach, and my older cousin carried me back to the room we were staying in, and we were staying in a room with my mother and my grandmother and my sister, and I guess I was like throwing up in my sleep, and like in front of my grandmother.
Okay.
You know? So that was not, you know, that's just not a normal occurrence for your first drink. You know, you go have a beer
No, you went all out.
with your dad or something,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like
try
here-
one.
Here
Yeah.
you go, son. Like that's normal, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, the reason I brought up that story is because it was progressive. I ended up, because of BMX riding, I really wasn't spending much time at home. And I remember, I'm not great with ages, but my 8th grade to freshman year of high school, I essentially like ran away from home, and I was away from home from a long time.
Where was this?
Well, I was in New Jersey.
In Jersey still,
I just
okay.
kind of left and didn't come back for long periods.
Okay.
And then they would get really worried, and I would just come home and do laundry and like clothes switch and stuff, and be like, okay, I'm going again to this person's house. So it wasn't like, it was a really elusive way of doing it, where I was like kind of cool about it. Like, I'm just going to stay at Jesse's house or Cody's house, and I just wasn't home ever.
Right.
You know, so for that summer that I didn't have school, I just spent it out doing whatever, and that also included drugs and alcohol. Wasn't really, at that time, it's not like something that presents itself. I wasn't like, oh, I suffer from a disease, I'm an addict. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
we're out having fun.
Right,
You know, we
exactly.
were, you know, drinking NyQuil and taking and beer and smoking weed and stuff. You know, it wasn't like we were on the corner chasing down crack, you know, robbing people for crack. You
Right.
know? And I like to talk about something that happened. You know, people always like to talk about trauma. I think it's a good, like, transparent honesty of experience. And I remember that summer because I had a friend, and we we all used to hang out, and we were walking him home from a town called Emerson to New Jersey, and we would always take the train tracks. Train tracks were great. Police didn't hang out on train tracks. It was a clear path. It was a quick way to go. And it was kind of fun. It was kind of like badass.
Yeah.
So we used to do that. So we were walking. We called him J-Dog. We never called anybody by their real names. It was just how it went usually. We were walking J-Dog home, and he never made it home. He got hit by a train. It was rough. He bled to death. His arm got ripped off. It was super gruesome. And the only reason I get into the gruesome part is because everybody told me the gruesome part and showed me the pictures. And again, new sobriety, trying to talk to people. I've never had trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma, nothing really happened to me. So in that denial and new in sobriety, I didn't consider any of these things impactful on me. But the truth of the matter is that particular experience really kind of made me feel like life was unfair, and that there was like doom and gloom that existed, and it was deep.
Right.
So that's what it did to me. It kept me from seeing all the positives in the world. It kept me from really developing that positive attitude that I needed. So I always like to talk about that experience. And there was something that happened after that too, kind of related to that. I was working at a grocery store a couple of years later, and J-Dog's mom came in, and she recognized me, and she lost it, started screaming and going, "You're the reason that, you let him wear the headphones on the train tracks. He didn't hear the trade." And she lost it on me. She was throwing stuff at me. So where I was with my drug use and my disconnect from my family, and just the place I had put myself in emotionally because of the things going on around me that I interpreted so negatively, that was kind of the last straw that crossed me into like a really bad path. And I can see that now. But again, even 2 years sober, I didn't really have that ability to reflect on that time.
No, I agree. I hear you. I definitely hear you, man.
Yeah.
Definitely hear you. So what did that look like? So after that incident, what did what are the next couple years? You finish high school?
Yeah.
You graduate high school?
Well, my high school had a 98.5 graduation rate.
Okay.
It wasn't like most high schools, so they just made you graduate, basically. Okay. To keep their numbers up, they didn't ever want people to not graduate.
Okay.
So I got very, very poor grades, but graduated.
And what did you do? What did you do after that?
Well, that was another thing that kind of like impacted me, was watching people get into colleges, and and there was a lot of that. I grew up in a very affluent town. Mm-hmm. So by the time I was going to high school, and in high school, everyone was showing up with like brand new BMW convertibles, like M3s, like the best of the best. Yeah. And I have like a 1989 Dodge Caravan with no windows that I used to put my BMX bike in the back. That's why I got a minivan. So it was, the culture was, I felt less than naturally. Mm-hmm. So when everyone was getting into these schools and their parents were paying for these, super expensive schools, it was really uncomfortable. So I went to a local college. My addiction was pretty bad at that point.
Okay.
I was into cocaine already, just pretty deep.
Yeah.
So I got kicked out pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you have any idea like what you wanted to do in terms of work, or what?
Yeah, I loved cars and engines in general, motors and anything that moved like that. So the college I went to was Rockland Community College, and I went to their automotive tech program. So It was basically like a dual, you get your associates, but then you also get trained. They had what they called the Chrysler apprenticeship program, which was a partnership with Chrysler to train on their cars and everything. Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't finish that? No, you got kicked out.
I got
got booted out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So then what happened? So this is a point where the addiction is like sky high right now. Like where are you at now with that? Like is it just taking a toll on you? Where are you at with that?
Another part of my story is Adderall. So I'm 37 years old. So Adderall was like a big thing in the ADHD. So, as they were trying to fix me, the psychiatrists were giving me a lot of Adderall, like an ungodly amount. And so when I found cocaine, that was like way better than Adderall.
Right.
So at that point in my life, when I was in college, I was pretty focused on just obtaining that as much as I could and maintain some kind of normalcy.
Okay.
So, yeah, when I left college, I ended up getting a job at a mechanic shop, and the mechanic shop was in Paterson, New Jersey, which is it's just not a very good area.
Yeah. No, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Most people have heard of it, especially people in recovery. Oh, Paterson, So that definitely geographically was the wrong move, but it's what I had. So.
Okay. So how long did you stay at that shop?
Oh, I worked there for years.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So the owner is a great guy. And I learned this, I kind of had a feeling he was in recovery, but I didn't really know what recovery was back then. Mm-hmm. So it turns out he was a big recovery guy. And he would say things to me and get on my case, but not like in an angry, confrontational way. And I just always looked to him as somebody who really cared about people. And then later I learned when I was working there, he had 9 years clean.
Oh, really?
Yeah. As part of my amends later, I actually went back up there, and there he was. Everything, it was eerily the same. When I went back and I pulled up, I had 4 years at the time. I waited quite a while to go back.
Yeah.
And I pulled in and talked to him, and he was just like, "I'm so happy for you."
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Because I lived in a minivan outside that shop for 6 months. So
you did?
I did.
Yeah.
So.
Did you try to, at this point, did you ever think about okay, this has a grip on me, I need to do something?
I had seen my friends go to programs, and I remember going to a 12-step meeting, but I thought because of the name, with the anonymous part in the name, I thought it was this club where people went to talk about hiding their using. And
okay.
And when I went in, I was spinning around. I'll be fully transparent. So I was spinning around a Suboxone on the table, and they were looking at me like I was crazy. And somebody asked me to come outside, and they said they had to talk to me and everything. And so they talked to me, and they said, "Listen, you got to come. You can't do that here." I said, "Oh yeah, sorry. we need to hide it. I get it. Sorry, man. I don't mean to blow up your spot." And he didn't. I don't think he did anything necessarily wrong, but I got the impression they didn't want me to come back.
That's what you felt. Okay.
I felt that way.
Okay.
He probably wasn't like that at all.
Right.
Because the reality is, I had my own really, really hazed up interpretation of that whole occurrence.
Okay, yeah.
Look at what I thought in the first place. So my thinking wasn't very clear. So that was kind of my impression. And, the way that I got introduced to any kind of recovery was actually a pretty brutal way. My story, I found recovery because I was in psych wards, a lot of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Psychosis.
Psychosis.
Yeah. And my family didn't know what to do, so they used to bring me to this place called Summit Oaks, and they were a dual diagnosis place, but it essentially was kind of like in New Jersey, it's a little different than a lot of the nice treatment centers and other places now, but back then, yeah, it was kind of like a psych ward, and they had 12-step meetings come in, so that was when I first kind of figured out that the anonymous part of that name wasn't about hiding drugs. It was about abstaining.
Right.
But I still didn't really connect. And I would say one of the reasons I didn't make a recovery connection is because I just felt so hopeless and defeated that I really just didn't think it was possible for me
to get sober.
Yeah. There was no way. I had now I know that I had a disease that absolutely would not let me at any cost or price stop.
And was there any rehab involved in this process at all?
Not back then.
No.
When I was 23, that's when the rehab stuff started. I got brought into a legal situation, which was not advantageous with freedom, and I had very limited options. So basically the judge, when he heard the option of me leaving the state, he got very excited about that. I skipped over a lot of my legals, but he was at that point in my life, he was very excited about the idea of me relocating to Florida. It was not my first time in front of him, nor was it my first time for those particular things. So my parents had set up, and they had used the rest of my college fund. Since I dropped out, there was some money in the college fund. They used it all in attorney fees.
Okay.
So that was like, yeah, that was the trade-off there. And they were like, you're out of attorney fees, Tyler. You know, you got to do something. So I went to a place in Florida that they had set up for me. And basically it seemed like, because that's something I would never do on my own. But when you're looking at jail time,
Right.
I mean, it's the better option.
Right, of course.
So
Then you moved to Florida,
yeah.
and you went to a facility. You went to a rehab.
I went to a facility, and I got kicked out of there within about 7 days.
What happened? How did you get kicked out of there?
Well, I left and went and got drugs, and they frown upon that. It was funny. I had the nickname at this facility. It was called the Window Bandit. We tied all the sheets together and climbed out, and we went and ran to the trailer park down the street and tried to get drugs. And most of the people looked at us like we were our heads were cut off. They're like, "What?" You know, we were like, "You know, do you have cocaine?" And they're like, "What? No." Like, it was very random. I always like to laugh about it because I was wearing, I had like this idea that, you know, it's like almost camo. So I was wearing like long black sleeves and long black pants, and it was like July. So I looked really out of place. But yeah, I got kicked out. We got picked up by the police, actually. I mean, again, driving down the street, you see some like super pale kid. You know, I was 112 pounds. I'm like 195 right now. So you can imagine what that was like, wearing like long sleeves.
In July.
Like walking around, like easy target. You know, they called him Big Country. He was a PBSO, but drug task guy. Yeah. So I got kicked out of there, and I wrote this letter. They're like, you know, you can stay if you write a letter of apology, like just make it really heartfelt. So I wrote a letter, and they read it, and they're like, you got to go, man. So I don't even know what I wrote. I guess it wasn't very good. So, but it gives you an idea where my mentality was back then. They ended up transferring me to another smaller facility, and I was there for quite a while. And actually, that first time coming out of a treatment center, I put together about 9 months.
Okay. So that was your first time actually completing the 30-day program?
Oh, yeah.
And you put nine months together?
Yeah.
All right. And you had a sponsorship? Were you going to meetings?
I picked a sponsor. So at that new facility I was at, they brought meetings in, and there was a guy, he showed up, he had a caddy, a really cool DeVille with like 22 chromes on it.
Yeah.
And they're like, pick somebody that has something that you want. And I didn't know they meant like spiritually. So I was like, well, that car is pretty cool. Yeah. So we went with him, and he was actually an awesome dude. And he legit did the best he could to take me through the steps. And I'm sure his interpretation was that I wasn't too serious about it, but he really stuck with it. So it almost made me think, I'm like, this guy believes in me. But the reality I understand now is like, yes, he probably believed I could, but like that helping another is what helped him. Mm-hmm. So that's why he was doing it. Yeah, you know, I just didn't really get it back then.
Yeah. So this was your first relapse?
Yeah. And, you know, just like
after 9 months,
just like they talk about, you know, when you don't prepare yourself, when you don't have any kind of setup of a recovery program, something will happen. Mm-hmm. You know, and if that wasn't the truth, there wouldn't be so many people relapsing. Yeah. It's not maybe something will happen, it's just when. Right. And that's what happened to me. I actually kind of tried to like get back into riding BMX, so I was doing this trick competition in Palm Beach Gardens, and I tried to do a trick that was it was sketch, and I ended up like breaking my foot. And I was still a mechanic at the time. I was working at Toyota, and, you know, being on your feet all day as a mechanic, I was in a lot of pain. I took my lunch break. I went down to Singer Island, and I was just like, man, you know, this foot really bothering me. Mm-hmm. And I heard a shake, like a, you know what I'm talking about. And some of the listeners will know what I'm talking about. It's the shake of a pill bottle. Yeah. And I heard it, and I looked at this guy. I mean, that's how we are. Mm-hmm. We're just that aware of that's just how we are,
Yeah.
right? So I said, hey, and he's like, hey, what's up, man? You know, and like, so next thing you know, he's giving me pills, and that was it. And I didn't have, you know, they had given me a bunch of suggestions, like don't get a girlfriend, don't get a car, you know, do this 90, you know, be super involved in everything. So, you know, I was like complaining to my girlfriend at the time, and I had driven my car to Singer Island. So, you know, I had done everything
Yeah.
they told me not to.
Exactly.
So at that point, it's kind of whatever.
Right. So then that kicked you off, and how long a run did you go on for?
Well, it was just 3 years of like really, really depressing. I mean, it was just in and out. I was just in and out. Sometimes I'd get 3 months. Sometimes I'd get 4. Sometimes I wouldn't last 2 weeks.
So you're still trying to go in the rooms, and
Oh, yeah.
you're still trying to work a program.
Oh yeah, and I just couldn't get it. You know,
Right.
when you hear readings and they say constitutionally incapable,
Right.
that rung in my ears. That's what I thought.
What was the catalyst? Like, what happened after those 3 years? What do you feel like it was a defining moment that something happened inside of you that said, okay, this is it, man. I can't do this anymore.
So, I don't know if you know this story, but the kind of first part of it was I woke up in my car in a parking lot in Walmart, and my arm was paralyzed.
No, I don't know this story.
Yeah, so I'm wearing a watch, but that big scar right there is actually from the surgery to help my hand be a hand again.
So you woke up in your car in a Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
You woke up, and your arm is you couldn't feel your arm.
It was no feeling, no control.
Okay.
So I'm like, this is like first stages of smartphones. So I'm like slow Googling, like what's wrong with me? And it's like, Google, you have had a stroke, you know? So like, I'm like, oh my God, it's my face. So I really didn't know what was going on. And I kind of like put off going and getting it looked at just because I was so scared of the answer. I just didn't. And it turns out that I had really what's kind of a mix of things, but they call it like Saturday night palsy, which is where you cut off blood flow to your nerves and your arm falls asleep. It's kind of like when you sleep on your arm,
Right.
But your body naturally will move you if you fall asleep on your arm, like you'll move so it doesn't continue. But when you're really that under influence, you won't.
Right.
You don't have that system working correctly. So that's what happened. So I had been going around for about a week with like the dead arm, and things were just really bad because things I was reading online were like, there's a good chance it will come back in 2 days. So I'm like, all right, you know, and
you're like toughing it out.
yeah, like I'm driving my car around with like the shifter over here, and you know, and yeah, I mean it was scary.
Right.
So you know, everybody has a fear, like, oh, I'm not scared of dying. Like, try to get like super disabled and then see what happens. You know, so. Long story short, I just had enough. I said, man, this is terrible. Like, I'm a mechanic, right? So I can't.
Right. I was just going to ask you, how are you working?
I wasn't.
You weren't.
So
Right.
things were just really bad. I ended up calling a friend of mine who was been in recovery for a while. And I was like, dude, I need help. And he got me into the same detox I had been to 3 other times during that 3-year period.
Okay.
And I went there, and I really didn't even want to go to treatment. I was just going to like detox, but I just ended up going to this treatment. Like there were case managers that talked me into it. And it's funny because now with my job, like people see me like push people so hard, and they're like, why do you do that? Like that's borderline kind of aggressive. And I'm like, yeah, because someone did it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, a little bit, but that's okay. And this is why. So I was in treatment 93 days. And
93 days.
Yeah, they say 93 days is 90 days is how long it takes to change a habit. I would say my habits had highly changed by that time because while I was in treatment, I got a sponsor.
Wait, you got a sponsor in treatment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I knew, I mean, I was just in such bad shape.
Yeah.
I just, people were like, you can make it out of this. And that like little glimmer of hope, because things were so bad, I was like, I might as well try. I mean, this is terrible.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like now with the arm thing, like this is, so I had actually asked my therapist, because I don't know, but as a guy, like I don't want to like ask people stuff. It's like asking someone on a date, you know, it's weird and uncomfortable. So I asked my therapist, and he actually gave me one of his sponsees because he had been sober a while. And so yeah, he actually came into the treatment center every Sunday.
Okay.
And would pick me up and we go do step work. And I remember, like, I talk about, psychic change that's a big set of words there. But my first kind of psyche change was when I came back with Chipotle one day. I had like half a bowl of Chipotle, and I walked back in, and everyone's like, "Whoa, bro, you got Chipotle?" And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Dude, where did you get that?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. I was just like out with my sponsor, and he was hungry, and we went there, and he bought it for me." They're like, "That's awesome." And then they're like going to the text, like, "I want a guy to come in and take me out for Chipotle." And like, I'm like, "Nah, man, it's really not about the Chipotle. Like, we're doing step work." And they're like, yeah, no, like Chipotle.
Right.
And that was the first time I realized, like, I wasn't the kid asking for the Chipotle anymore.
Yeah. That moment.
Yeah.
And that's a defining moment, man. Like, a lot of people, that's why you have that constant relapse. Like, people sometimes they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't see that like, I've had enough. And this is so positive, and I feel like I can do this, and I feel like I can work into a life of recovery. And I like to hear that, man. I like to hear that type of stuff because it is possible, and it does happen to people.
Yeah.
So you were with this sponsor after you got out as well too?
Yeah.
And you're still with him? Is it?
No, not
okay.
anymore.
Right.
I have a new one now.
Okay.
But I mean, for years, this was up in Port St. Lucie. So when I moved back down, I held on for a while and then transitioned on with the sponsor thing. And so, but yeah, I mean, it was, again, there was a period where when he was coming into the treatment center, I was super convinced my mom was like paying this dude. Because I didn't understand, in the beginning, I'm like, these people, like, this makes no sense.
Right.
I don't understand it. And, here we are today, and I sponsor, and people are like, wow, why is he has me over for dinner every week, or whatever. And I get it.
And do you feel that for you to stay sober, giving back what was really given to you, that helps you on a daily basis for your recovery? That really motivates you, and you see yourself in your sponsees?
I mean, at this point in my life is really just like 24/7 recovery.
Okay.
I have my job, I work in the treatment field still, and I actually talk to a lot of people every day on the phone. One of my things that I do is I help people that are really struggling to find help because I know the systems really well. I've been doing it for a while now. So I like the hard cases, and I like to help them figure out the answers. And I also like to talk to the guy that, needs the convincing, that only wants to go to detox for a week.
Yeah.
And while it's not actually my job that they pay me for, really, like, I do that a lot just because I see, like, cases. I'm like, I'm going to talk to this kid. And so it's awesome. I love doing it. I actually tried to get out of the industry and, like, sell insurance, and it didn't go well. I just
you told me that on the phone.
I wasn't motivated at all. Like, I'd probably be really lazy if I went into another field of work. But, yeah, I mean, and then some people struggle with, working in recovery, and there's burnout, and then, going to meeting for themselves afterwards. But honestly, I don't know why, but I don't.
I mean, you definitely can separate the two in terms of, like, you're coming up on 12 years, bro. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's amazing, man.
It's wild. Thank you. Yeah.
And now you're married?
Yeah. And like, that's a crazy concept for me. I always think about, like, she has no idea what I was like before.
Yeah.
It's just wild. And it's kind of that way. Part of that story with the paralyzed arm, my sister was pregnant with her first child, and I had this thought. I thought, her daughter could never see me high. Mm-hmm. Like, if I do this right now, I'll never be the high uncle.
Right.
And I don't know, like, if that actually meant anything, like, in my mind at the time, but in times where I had struggles, I actually thought about that. I said, my sister, I put my sister through a lot, but that meant something to me. And it was a little bit extra of a push. Right. And I've heard, people say, oh, well, I have to get sober for this and that. That never worked for me. But on top of other motivations that let you actually participate in your recovery when you're willing to, they can help.
Yeah. I mean, most definitely. I think that, when we met, you know that I have children, and
Yes.
there's a lot of people that say you need to get in recovery for yourself, and that'll help you be a better husband, father. For me, it's very important on my list that I show my children, what not to do, what to do right, to break the cycle. My dad died in active addiction, so I think that there's a point where you realize that each addict is different in their recovery, but whatever works for them is best. And whatever, to me, it's very, you have a powerful message, and you were always there. You always were there for me in the beginning. And we were just talking, you were talking about motorcycles and motors and cars, and I had the GTI, and,
Yeah.
But it was just something where you just listen. And that's, that's a lot, because it's so raw when you come out of rehab and you go into IOP, and you just don't know how to function as a regular human being. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I appreciate that, man. I really, look up to your recovery, what you do. I'm glad that you're not, you stuck in the field, most definitely.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you actually coming in, man.
Yeah.
It was a great story, dude. It was good to see you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for
Good to
having
see
me.
you. Yeah, most definitely. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you know of anybody that is in need of just somebody to talk to in terms of addiction recovery, you can email me at BAMNrealrecoverytalk@gmail.com. Thanks for coming in, bro. It's good to see you.
You too.
All right, take care.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.